Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thrilled to have you on this great Monday and Happy New Year to everybody. So, thanks for joining as we discuss the future of NTIA in the BEAD program. This is a very important topic, obviously, with the new administration, and certainly one that will be weighing heavily on our minds on both service providers, partners, as well as state broadband offices. I want to introduce a few very key and influential guests today. We have Sarah Morris, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and Deputy Administrator of the NTIA in an acting position. And she will be interviewed by Gigi Sohn, the President of the American Association of Broadband.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here, and I'm so pleased to see so many folks here today, particularly since most of us, at least in Washington, are socked in by a tremendous snowstorm. And Sarah, in addition to being socked in, has to take care of her young daughter because her daughter's socked in too. So really, really appreciate Sarah being here today. Let me just say a few words about AAPB. So we are the American Association for Public Broadband. And we represent communities that want to take their digital future into their own hands. For whatever reason, they want to have ownership of broadband infrastructure so everyone in their communities can have affordable, robust broadband. And we are going to be working very hard this year. We expect the federal government, will be still working on the BEAD program, but a lot of the issues will move to states and localities. So we're going to be very, very active to make sure that those communities that don't get BEAD funding, haven't gotten ARPA funding, have robust broadband. So I hope you'll consider joining us. Our website is aapb.us. We've got a lot planned for this year, including a conference in May here in Washington, D.C. So I hope to see everybody there, and I hope that folks will join. So let me move over to speaking with Sarah. And Sarah, first, I want to thank you first for your service at NTIA over the past nearly 4 years. I know that standing up the BEAD and digital equity programs, in addition to everything else NTIA has to do, and people I think don't realize NTIA isn't just a broadband agency, right? I mean, it's the executive branch telecommunications and technology policy agency. So it does an awful lot more than just broadband, although everybody's always focused, and needless to say, it's important, on the $42.5 billion BEAD program. But in addition to everything else NTIA has accomplished, it represents an enormous achievement for NTIA Administrator Davidson, yourself, and your wonderful staff. So you guys have accomplished an awful lot in the past 4 years. So I want to congratulate you, and I hope you will take a well-deserved break after government. Oh, there's the poll.
Yes. And thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Real quick for the audience, love to get your input on where you are in your BEAD journey. So real quick, either share with us that you're in the process, you plan to apply, you may apply, or will not apply. We've been doing this poll for the last 12 months as everybody's filling it out. And it's been interesting as we've progressed closer and closer to the application period of many of the states, how folks have been, watching the negotiation going on between the states and the federal government. And as things started to firm together, as the maps got better, things look brighter and brighter from a BEAD standpoint. And I believe we're turning the tables on this. So I would love for anybody who's willing to just jump in and let us know where you are in the process, and we'll show the statistics in a second. How's it looking, Joe?
Looking good. Here are the results.
All right. Well, that's great. That's what we want to see. So, over 75%, or in some state either applying or plan to apply or may apply. So thanks, and back to you, Gigi.
Sorry for that interruption, folks.
Interruption.
Well, as I said before, Sarah, it's been a whirlwind 4 years for an agency that is often overlooked, quite honestly, but in my mind anyway, has clearly surpassed surpass the FCC in importance and relevance when it comes to connecting all U.S. households. What do you feel is the most significant impact of the BEAD and digital equity programs?
Well, thanks, Gigi. I want to start out by thanking the American Association for Public Broadband and for Calix for inviting me to participate. I'm always excited to talk about the broadband work that we're doing, in part because I've been working on these issues for almost the entirety of my career, certainly on my time in DC. And, Gigi, it's fun to be up on stage with you, virtual stage with you. In this role, I think this is the first time that we've done an event together, so it's good to be back in the fold. And to answer your question, the importance of these programs, I don't think can be overstated. As I said, I've been doing this work for nearly 20 years. In this role at NTIA, along with Assistant Secretary Davidson, we've traveled throughout the country. We've seen folks on the ground who lack connectivity, who lack affordable connectivity, and just cannot succeed in the modern digital economy without it. And this impacts everything. We've been saying this for years. Access to healthcare, being able to do telehealth, whether we're in a pandemic or just in normal times, it's the ability to connect to educational tools and resources, whether it's actual courses or just the infrastructure. As a parent, I now know what it means to have to access my child's daycare portal even, and I rely on connectivity to be able to do that. Entrepreneurship, we've seen connectivity make the difference in places like rural Alaska to having access to the tools to run a business or not. And it's just critically important that we are all on a level playing field when it comes to this very basic and incredibly vital resource. The other thing I'll say is, in terms of impact, we have $50 billion to solve this problem, to connect everyone in the country to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. We will not get $50 billion again, whether in this administration, the next administration, or any administration after that. And so, when we think about impact, this is a degree of resourcing that we have never seen for solving this problem. And I have felt a tremendous responsibility to make sure that we are standing up these programs well and quickly and effectively, because I know firsthand how significant this problem is and how critical these programs are to solving it.
Actually, Sarah, I think you and I were on a net neutrality panel together on the Hill, but we're not going to be talking about that today, trust me. So, look, particularly since I would say like October, there's been a lot of criticism from the bleacher seats and from some very influential people too, that have said that the build out of broadband networks using BEAD money has been too slow. Well, what would you say to those critics? And do you see the process, the BEAD process, speeding up in the future with all the planning work you've put into place at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Gigi. We have never done anything like I said, I just said, we've never had $50 billion to solve this problem. And we were given, NTIA was tasked with building up this grant program, which itself is unlike anything that we've ever done across any part of government. So, we are doing block grants to states, and then they are in charge of running their sub-award processes to determine which providers receive support to build out to which unserved and underserved locations. It's a complex process. And, to be clear, I will say, coming into government, I didn't have a sense of how this all worked in terms of, the complexity of standing up these types of grant programs. And what I've seen on the inside is a team of people, from the program team standing up and implementing this work to the assistant secretary overseeing it as one of his absolute top priorities at NTIA, to a commerce secretary who expects flawless and expedient execution for all of her major priorities, of which this is one. It has just been a tremendous flurry of work from the day that I stepped foot in the door to getting the notice of funding opportunities out ahead of schedule, to supporting all of the states as they got in their initial statements of interest, their initial proposals, working with the states through the FCC's mapping process and allocation. At every stage, everyone has been working at breakneck speed to get this money out the door, because we all understand that every day that we are not building these networks, that people are unconnected. So one, we are working with the timelines that Congress and the program that Congress gave us, and trying to do this work as quickly as possible, as carefully as possible, and doing it in a way that in it itself is innovative as when it comes to government programs. We've got a federal program officer in every state that wakes up every morning thinking about how they are going to help their state broadband office achieve the goals of the BEAD, digital equity, middle mile, and tribal programs. So we are investing in this at every level. And I just can't overstate how proud I am of the team and how quickly and furiously everyone has worked to get this money out. And we have made tremendous strides. Every state is currently either in the midst of their challenge process or has completed their challenge process. So when we think about like where we are on the field, we're not at we're like close to the goalposts at this point. We are getting ready to, the states are getting ready to start their sub-award process, and that will be when we start seeing real movement outside of the agency.
So you're in the red zone, basically.
Yeah. I shouldn't be trusted with football analogies, but yes.
I can be, and I'm a Jets fan. But in any event, but I do think people lose sight of the processes that Congress put in place that you had to follow, right? You couldn't just like say, all right, guys, here's the money, right? I mean, they required several grant proposals and they required a 5-year plan. So I think people do. I mean, if you could talk a little bit about, the steps you had to take, and also you decided, I think, wisely, and I think this is something I spoke to the Secretary of Commerce about, or very early on, the idea to put a program officer in for every single state to make sure that, NTIA was kind of following what the states were doing. You had to hire those people. These are not small things that happen in a heartbeat. So maybe, Sarah, can you talk a little bit about like the steps that were necessary to get to the red zone?
Sure. And I'll talk about this on sort of a high level because it's easy to get kind of like mired in all of the details of all of the back and forth. But there were a few what I call big rocks that we had to move. One, we had to write the notice of funding opportunity. These are essentially the implementation guidelines for three grant programs: digital equity, BEAD, middle mile, and then later tribal. As I said, those we released ahead of schedule, but drafting a notice of funding opportunity itself is no small feat. So we were focused on that. Then the states had to submit their expressions of interest, particularly in the BEAD program. And this was the first time, imagine, not only are we staffing up on the federal program officer side, the states are themselves standing up, in many cases, standing up their first broadband office ever. And so, which is also a very cool result of these programs. So we're working with the states as they're building the plane while it's flying. Another big rock we had to deal with was the FCC maps. And so the takeaway here, both NTIA and the FCC had separate statutory directives with regard to the FCC's maps. The FCC was directed to modernize their maps and allow for direct input from stakeholders into the maps to make sure that they were more accurate than they ever had been. NTIA was instructed to use the FCC's maps to determine how much money each state received as part of the $42.5 billion BEAD program. So imagine the $42.5 billion pie. The FCC maps determined through a formula how much each state was able to get, what size of the slice of the pie that each state was getting. This is a process I know very well because I led, when I was a senior advisor at NTIA, led our mapping process internally. Once we made allocation announcements, again, ahead of our promised schedule, states had 6 months, 180 days to get their initial proposals in. All states did. And that was when, the horses were off to the races. The states were just now figuring out how are we going to spend this money. And NTIA was developing the infrastructure to approve those initial proposals. So then we've approved initial proposals. Now states are developing their challenge process, running their challenge process, which determines exactly which locations in the state will be eligible for service and which service providers will be eligible to serve them. So that's where we are now. We are in the process. So the states are essentially determining the implementation strategy for the funding that they've been given. And we're right where we should be when it comes to Congress's intent and directives to NTIA. I will just pause and say that was BEAD. Meanwhile, they're also standing up the Middle Mile program, which we really see as the force multiplier for all of these grant programs, particularly BEAD. And the other thing to keep in mind is that BEAD's really designed here to be the cleanup player for all of the unserved locations that we haven't been able to hit through other federal funding programs. So we want middle mile money out there, and it is out there. We're building 3,000 plus miles of fiber as we speak, with thousands more to come. All of our middle mile awards have been giving. So we stood up and executed a competitive grant program, all while standing up the $42.5 billion BEAD program. We've also been deploying or standing up our digital equity program, our tribal program. We have developed an entire strategy around Build America, Buy America, which ensures that as we are investing tens of billions of dollars into these grant programs, that we have the supply built in the United States to meet the demands of those programs. And I have personally visited facilities that have been stood up as a result of our Build America, Buy America efforts, which have really been, I think, a standout example within the administration of how to execute on those requirements. And so all of that to say, many steps in the process, many important steps in the process, and also not just with the BEAD program, which is where we focus a lot of our time, but we've been building up these other grant programs and strategies alongside them as well.
Great. That's terrific. So there's only a short time remaining, right? We got 2 weeks, right? Before the new administration takes control. So are there any areas where we'll see new guidance or modifications in existing guidance and programs from you guys?
So we just released what we call our alt tech guidance, which helps explain how states can implement the variety of tools at their disposal to ensure that every area in the country is connected. We know that some areas are going to be particularly hard to serve, and will need innovative solutions on the ground to make sure that that we can connect them, states connect them affordably. We're continuing. Like I said earlier, we've been on this furious pace for the past 4 years. I've seen it firsthand, and we're just in the next 2 weeks that we have remaining. I think you'll just see a continuation of that pace as we work to get grant money out the door, as we work to continue to support states in all of their efforts and keep these programs moving so that we can hand them off to the next administration in as strong a shape as absolutely possible.
Great. So we've heard what may or may not happen to the BEAD and Digital Equity Act funding and to some of the particulars of the program. Again, this is all press. Nothing has happened yet. Have you or your colleagues been in touch with anyone on the transition team or from the incoming administration? And whether or not you have or you have not, if you could look into your crystal ball, what predictions would you make about what changes the new administration might make in the first 100 days, or might they not make any changes at all?
Thanks, Gigi. So I can't discuss the transition process, but I will say, and I won't prognosticate on what a future administration might do in with these programs. But I can tell you that we are laser focused on what we can get done in the 2 weeks we have remaining, in part because we have so much momentum right now. We have been eyes on the prize. We have been working with the states, with internet service providers, with a variety of stakeholder groups to stand up these programs in a way that is effective and balances a wide range of equities and interests. I will say any major changes to the programs will size effects on that momentum. And there are a lot of folks who are invested in making sure that we hit this goal, connecting everyone in the country to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And we need all of those players at the table. And these are not just red states, blue states, urban areas, rural areas. It is everyone in the country. The need for broadband access affects everyone. The disparities are everywhere. And this is a program, like I said, we are not going to get another $50 million. We need this money on track in order to get that ball into touchdown territory. I guess if we're already in touchdown territory, red zone, to actually get the touchdown and connect everyone. I told you I shouldn't be trusted with football analogies. And, we've seen widespread bipartisan political support for these programs. I spent hundreds of hours on calls with broadband offices and governor's offices, congressional offices, in my time as the senior broadband advisor. And I've been on the ground in lots of places in my time as deputy administrator. Everyone understands how critically important these programs are. We can disagree about the details of implementation and where things might need to where others might feel we need to make course corrections at the margins. But fundamentally, I think these programs are just so important, so critical, so intertwined, and so far along that the best path forward is to just keep up the momentum that we've built in the time that we've had it at NTIA through the next administration and beyond.
And feel free not to answer this question if you don't want to, but have you been hearing from governors' offices concerns, state offices, either the governors' offices themselves or the state broadband offices themselves, that they are concerned that, BEAD will somehow, go off track, or, some money will be, rolled back? Are you hearing it all from those folks, or do people feel confident enough that the program is well enough along that it will just continue to thrive?
So every state is different. And I think every state has different political dynamics, different governor's offices, different broadband offices, different state legislatures. So it's impossible to sort of categorically talk about what we've been hearing. I think what people, what all stakeholders, whether it's governors, broadband offices, members of Congress, internet service providers, want to see is certainty and that continued momentum that I had talked about.
Great. So, look, there's an awful lot of people on this webinar, and I think part of that reflects anxiety and concern over what might happen to both programs in the short and long term. I mean, there is quite a bit of anxiety. I mean, I'm hearing from a lot of people myself. What advice would you give to broadband providers, state broadband officers, and other advocates for universal connectivity that want to ensure that this money gets spent the way Congress intended? And if you could also, I mean, again, and I think there's maybe even more anxiety around the digital equity programs because of particularly the digital equity competitive grants. And maybe you can explain what those different grants are. There's 3 grants. There's there's the state capacity grants, there's the competitive grants, and what's the third one?
State planning grants. Those are a little bit OBE at this point.
Right. So it's really the 2. There's the capacity grants that go to the states, and there's competitive grants that go to mostly nonprofits and others that are actually doing the work on the ground. So, of course, now I've explained it. But if you could talk first about maybe some of the anxiety over BEAD, and then talk about specifically the digital equity programs, because from my vantage point, and it may just be who I hang out with, the biggest source of anxiety is the digital equity competitive grants.
Yep. So I'll start with your first question, which is what can folks do if they are in a moment of anxiety? So first of all, I would just say stay engaged, particularly with the state broadband offices, the governors, and particularly members of Congress. I think this is now a good time to spend educating members of Congress on the importance of the BEAD program to you as a stakeholder. I think for internet service providers, we have a growing number of states where ISPs have already been selected as subgrantees. And in those instances, those stakeholders have millions of reasons to be invested in the continued existence and momentum with the BEAD program. And, I think just focusing, one thing I think it's important for folks to understand, if you care about the BEAD program and care about this, that you should care about this full suite of grant programs that we have as part of this $50 billion investment in closing the digital divide. That includes the digital equity program, it includes the tribal program, it includes the middle mile program. All of these programs we designed our NOFOs and designed the execution of our program, designed the structure of how these programs are administered within NTIA, with the acknowledgement that they are interconnected, dependent upon on each other for success, and that making changes to one of the programs, like making dramatic changes to the requirements of BEAD or halting progress on BEAD, is going to have outsized effects on others, and vice versa. Any derailments on middle mile or digital equity is going to change the effectiveness of BEAD in the long run. And so I'd urge folks to think very carefully about the interdependent nature of the grant programs and the impacts that making major changes will have on them. On digital equity, so you're right, there's 3 grant programs. There's a digital equity planning grant program. So every state across the country applied for and received a digital equity planning grant, which was important because in an example of the interconnected nature that I was just talking about, we required every BEAD plan to include a digital equity plan and component. And they all did. The digital equity capacity grants, those grants were designed, every state who applied for and received a digital equity planning grant was eligible to apply for a capacity grant. And these are the bigger dollar execution grants. And we have awarded all of those digital equity capacity grants to the states. The third piece that you discussed was the digital equity competitive grant program. And so this is different than the planning grants and capacity grants were all state grants. So they were grants that were awarded to the states, again, on a formula basis, not on a competitive basis. The competitive grant program is open to a much wider variety of stakeholders to deliver digital equity goals in support of this broader effort to connect everyone in the country to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. So recognizing that BEAD is focused primarily on infrastructure investments, connecting the under and unconnected, digital equity is designed to support folks as they're coming online or using the internet to do so effectively, affordably, and to make sure that we're reaching all potential stakeholders, whether it's veterans, folks in rural areas, the elderly. We just want to make sure that the investments that we're making on BEAD are touching the lives of the people who need them most. And we haven't announced our we are in the process of reviewing and the competitive grant awards, but if you're focusing on those and concerned about the competitive grant program, I would just say stay tuned as we move into the final weeks.
Great. Anything else you might want to add? Anything else you think people really ought to know, in not only in these next 2 weeks, but just, going forward about the programs, about NTIA itself, and about the future. I mean, I appreciate and I agree 100%. Like, we're not going to see another $50 billion for broadband in our lifetimes. It's just not going to happen. And I don't think it matters who's in charge, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. This is a once in a lifetime investment, and we have to make sure that it's invested in a way that connects every U.S. household with, robust and affordable broadband. There's just no two ways about it. So I think folks need to keep their eye on the prize. And I also agree, Sarah, when you say it's not about. I think we often, and I'll blame myself as well. I think we often get sort of buried in, technology talk. And what's better, satellite or FWA, fixed wireless, or or fiber. It's not about technology talk. It's about what broadband enables. And I have a preference for fiber, as does this program, as does Congress. Had a preference for for robust and scalable technology. But we get lost in the talk over technology, and we don't talk enough about what broadband enables: education, entrepreneurship, economic opportunity, healthcare for everyone, so you don't have to drive 100 miles if you live in a rural area. It goes on and on and on. And I think we do get lost sometimes. So I think it's important what you said earlier about what broadband enables. Keeping your eye on that prize is super important. So before we let you go and bring in Kevin, do you have any other words of wisdom for the folks on this webinar?
I would double click on the point I made earlier about NTIA and the work that's gone into these programs and the way that we've set them up for success going forward. For folks who may be watching from home who haven't had the first-hand front row seat that I've had as these programs have stood up, the perceptions about how government works. I know people sometimes have these assumptions that it's slow and bureaucratic and ineffective, and that could not be farther from what I have seen from my perch inside of government. These are the people running these programs, standing them up, care deeply about connecting the unconnected. They care deeply about improving the outcomes for folks across the country, and they have worked countless hours, spent weekends away from their family, holidays away from their family, to make sure that we are meeting the deadline set forth by Congress and helping states be as successful as they can when they're in their own role in closing the digital divide and connecting everyone in the country to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. So if you see an NTIA employee, particularly one that works on the broadband program, give them a hug or a pat on the back. And I look forward to seeing many of you back in the wild when I'm on the other side of this wild journey in a couple of weeks.
Well, great, Sarah. Thank you so much. And I'm giving you a virtual hug because you just, I have a lot of friends at NTIA, including the administrator, Parul Desai and Lucas Petersak. I mean, these are great people and folks that were there and left, like Nick Alexander and Russ Hanser. I mean, these are like top of the line telecom experts, many of them who had FCC experience. And I think, and you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, but I will. I think, some of the FCC's experience with giving out money, for example, for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, did color the way you guys shaped this program, because you wanted to make sure, and you can tell me I'm full of it or not, you want to make sure this money got spent to build networks and not to sit on or not to default, but to actually make sure, that these networks get built. So, there may have been some extra, oversight by you guys to make sure that, this $50 billion investment actually was invested wisely. You're not going to say anything.
Well, I will just say we learned lessons from every prior grant program, whether it was at NTIA, elsewhere. We built all of that with the expertise of the folks on the team and in the front office at NTIA. And we're really proud of what we built and the energy and the thought behind the programs.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Take a good, well-deserved rest. Again, I'm giving you another virtual hug, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Gigi. Thanks, and thanks, Calix.
Yeah,
having those.
and hang on. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's brought up a lot of questions. So I like to hit some of the questions that have come out, and I'll go ahead and answer those. So let me just go to the first one, and let's see. Thank you for your patience. There we go. So, can you see a screen of the United States?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, I've been getting a lot of questions about what's happening in my state, and so I'm going to answer a number of questions all at one time. We have seen over the past 2 weeks just incredible amount of interest from the states, for the state's readiness to move forward. And I break it up into 3 different categories. We have 3 states that have reached out and put forward their provisional final proposal. That's Delaware, Louisiana, and Nevada. So I'm really excited about that. But what I'm even more excited is the fact that all the blue states, so we have 19 states that are in full application. And the full application means that they are engaging directly with the service providers, that they have been over the several months, but going through that process. And then finally, the gray ones, 14, are sitting in a pre-qualification process. Now, it could be that they've in the middle of the pre-qualification, or they've just wrapped up and they're waiting for their application to move forward and they meet some of the goals of NTIA. So this is 65% of the states, and things are moving forward pretty nicely. What I really want to stress here is the importance of the service providers continue to work with the state offices moving forward. And I think that's how we're going to get over the finish line. Gigi, I loved your red zone. I think now the quarterback is looking at the goal line, and they're looking at, okay, what are the few other things I need to do over the next couple months to move things forward. But things are really picking up. I feel like that we're in full motion right now. So moving forward, I hope I can echo out and people will echo back the fact that they share that feeling as we're moving forward. So some of the specifics, and jump in anytime, Gigi. Some of the specifics of what the questions that came in were around, and just gotta get my screen adjusted here.
I just hope the states don't wait to the last game like Aaron Rodgers to throw 3 touchdowns. Put it that way.
Hallelujah. Okay, so I'm gonna try to capture some of these questions, and some of them we may have to take offline. But there's questions around performance testing. As you may have seen, a preliminary policy notice went out 2 to 3 weeks ago, and they are collecting the comments and they're moving forward. So performance testing is something that has been around for the last 5 or 6 years around the CAF program, as well as now the RDOF program, just launching that moving forward. And the NTIA is taking advantage of the work that's been done in the FCC at USAC to bring that same structure into the BEAD program. So performance testing is important in some aspects because what it's really doing is it's making sure that the taxpayers' money are being used correctly. I would say that most of the BEAD applicants have already or typically have taken CAF funding in the past or RDOF funding in the past. So what we're seeing moving forward will be a smooth transition into the BEAD program. And everything I saw in the public notice, I think it will be. So I'm kind of excited there. So you're not starting from ground zero. If you're just first time you've done this type of performance testing, there's a lot of tools and experience out there to make sure that you're ready to move forward. Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. And thank you, Gigi and Sarah, if you're still online. It was a fantastic morning. Thank you.
Well, thanks to everybody. And we look forward to seeing you all in the new year. And once again, I got to put a plug in for AAPB. They'll be working with local communities to try to make sure that all their households are connected. There are going to be a lot of places that don't get BEAD funding, and we want to make sure that nobody is offline. So thanks, everybody, and Happy New Year.